Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, July 14th, and this is your end of day recap. So, quite a day on our hands. This was a fun day to trade. We started the day off and we had a little bit of continuation. It was kind of interesting, just to kind of start from the beginning of the day and what I had talked about in the TTG pre-market session that we do every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. What I started off saying was, hey, I didn't really like that futures were bouncing a little bit. They were up like 20, 30 basis points around like 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. And it just was it looked like, when the market does that, when we have kind of a decent sell-off day like we had at the end of the day yesterday, usually, like, I would rather have the market, again, I can't have the market do what I want, but I would have rather like have us start the day like down 1%, and then it kind of entices buyers to come out and buy the dip. When we start the day like up like 30 or 40 basis points, like where futures were around 8 o'clock this morning, it entices people who couldn't sell yesterday to kind of hit the bid and sell a little bit. So that's kind of what we saw this morning, and particularly it was a continuation a little bit of the Nasdaq selling yesterday, and this kind of got to a point down at 10 o'clock this morning. I don't know if we actually hit any support here, but you could see there was, absolute, a little bit of continuation, and then I started to see other things perform pretty well. Like there was a pretty decent deviation. You could see those bars did get below value for the week at Nasdaq, but if you look at things like the diamonds. Right, there was some decent deviation that was taking place, and kind of what I thought would be a continuation from yesterday, which was a little bit of a rotation into value. And I think, by the way, like that's perfectly normal. We want to see that from time, in my opinion. You want to see that from time to time. So why do you want to see a rotation into value? Or why is my thinking that you do want to see a rotation into value sometimes? Because you just don't want to see growth go straight up and value go straight down. There has to be some point of correction a little bit, that takes place. So and if we look at this in terms of charts, here's small cap value versus small cap growth. And this is in need of a little bit of correction between the two to have value outperform a little bit. We just don't want to see things get, in my opinion, you just don't want to see things get so extreme where it's the same and only a few groups of stocks going up, and the other groups just keep on going down. There has to be some middle ground. The same groups can outperform, but there has to be a little bit of a check back from time to time, right? And that's kind of what we saw to this, starting yesterday, and obviously continuation today. But you have to realize that there is so much money in some of these growth areas, and there's reason why there has been the case, right? We have this coronavirus thing going on where people are going to be working home for longer than expected, and there's certain stocks that are going to do well. I don't need to explain that again because we know that we've been trading this trade for the last 3 or 4 months. You just have to pay attention when it really gets extreme. And the issue is it can't just be like, oh, we're going to put a little bit of money into value and we're going to take some out of growth. The problem is that growth becomes very, very overcrowded, and everybody's in those names. So it does, and then when someone starts to sell, it kind of, it's a little bit of a domino effect, right? There's more and more people want to get out so that they make sure that they're getting out with profits, right? So that's why you see these names pull back pretty decently. But again, this is just part of the process. Now, what was pretty good, if we back this up to what I was talking about pre-market, and I was basically saying, let this kind of take place. Be patient with the growth names. Look for some other areas that may participate a little bit better. As long as the market doesn't get like run over where everybody is selling, and where the VIX, starts to get, really, really hot. And the VIX was up to 33 this morning and then started to dive. We don't know what we're going to get until it really develops, right? Nobody has a crystal ball and says that, oh, today was a great dip to buy, at 9 o'clock in the morning when the market's selling off. Nobody knows that because we don't always get just like a half a day or 1 day sell off. Sometimes it could be a multiple day sell off. So you just kind of have to be patient and watch for things, watch for certain indicators, like the VIX, for example, which you could see right around 10 o'clock was kind of bid up a little bit. Same thing with VXN, which is again the VIX for the Qs, and this stopped at around 10 o'clock, right? And then these things started to kind of move down. So it's one of the things that we go over in the room, but my thought was let this play out with the growth names, because as it does, and if we see these names kind of pull back into support, we'll see if the support holds. But you kind of have to wait a little bit because, and I'll show you what I did. I mean, I started with one trade, but bottom line is, like, I kind of set this up pretty nice. Like, I got out of some trades at the end of once I started to see what was materializing at the end of the day yesterday, I just got out of the way. Because I know that if we have some continuation the next day, which we did in the morning today, I want to be able to capitalize on that. I don't want to worry about existing positions, right? I don't want to worry about managing like, oh geez, all these names are going down. I want to be very, very nimble when the market is moving fast, and then I can attack where I want to rather than playing defense, right? You could use a lot of different sports analogies, but you want to be playing offense. You don't want to be playing deep in your zone, defense, defending your goal line when the market is moving fast. You want to be on your toes. So again, it's just something that I've learned trading over the years, is that when you see things are not working out and you've got issues, you could either reduce your positions, or you could put on a hedge so that it will. And so it's a buffer for you. And you of course, want to put on a hedge based on what positions you have on. Like if you're if you're in a lot of those growth names, you want to probably put on a hedge in the Qs, not in S&P, right? Because you want to make sure that you're watching your exposure, right? So if you put on a SPY put today, that wasn't going to work if you're long, growth names and names in the Nasdaq. All right, so that's a little bit of just my thought process this morning, but yeah, I was trying to tell traders in the room, and again, I'm not giving anybody recommendations. I'm not. This is all for information purposes only, and I'm telling people what I'm doing. But my experience is just get out of the way a little bit, and let the price action kind of come to you. And what did we talked about a couple names that I thought might be interesting. A couple of members actually asked me about this because we talked about Caterpillar yesterday. And Caterpillar was one of those names today that was setting up and it wasn't going down with everything else, right? So in the morning, of course, everything went down, but it started to rally and was actually green. So this was a really nice trade. This was up 4.8%. So again, if you're nimble, and if you're playing a little bit more on the offense and not playing defense, you can find names that have the momentum to them. So I didn't see very many people talking about Caterpillar. I even put this on Twitter as a bullish setup, but everybody's like, oh, geez, the FANG stocks are down and Amazon and Tesla is down. It seemed like everybody's focused on that. You want to be on the offensive and find where they're actually rolling the money into. So this worked really well. And again, I'm not perfect. I actually started, I thought, CrowdStrike being down. And if we look at this chart, and then I'll go over some of the other trades, because certainly I did a lot of trades today. But I said, in the beginning of the day, I said, well, this name's been down. And it took out. I think it took out this. No, it didn't take out this VPOC. It was right in here. And I wanted to buy one of these names on the dip because again, I don't know in the first 15 minutes. But I set my stop, and it went through my stop, and I got out of it. I'm like, okay, well, that's not the picture of what we're going to get. We're going to see a little bit more. And I got stopped out of this. I got in at 108. So this was just a starter, like a feeler position. And I stopped out of that at 105. And then, of course, you're able to get in cheaper, right? So that's the other thing is sometimes when the market is volatile and has a multiple day dip, you want to be really careful with buying the dip. You just want to make sure that you're setting your stops by doing it, because sometimes, like today, and I wanted to make sure that I talked about this too. Like, I think overall we've been very lucky as traders right now. You know, we've seen before multiple times in the last few years that we have multiple day pullbacks, right? And those can be a little bit painful. We had a couple hours, or not even a couple hours this morning, a couple hours yesterday and an hour this morning. That's really a short-lived dip. So we're lucky with this kind of thing, because you don't know if you're going to get a 2 or 3 day sell-off. Uh, so that's why you want to have discipline in what you're doing. And as I said in yesterday's video, control what you can control, which is your risk. But I do that. So I've had a knack of, sometimes you're like, wow, this CrowdStrike was down 5% yesterday and it's down another 5% today, and I've been waiting to get into this name, and then it just continues to get hit over the head. This thing slowed down at 101. But that's kind of what you want to do, in my opinion. You're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But look at where this thing kind of stopped, right at the top of value. We're going to come back to a couple charts like this, but yeah, this was a really nice setup, moving outside of value here for Caterpillar. I just want to talk about a couple of value names first. Honeywell was also a pretty nice move. I also traded that one this morning too. So again, being aware that other things can move, and this was just a move basically through value, through the 1 hour value area. And then I started to see things like, somebody asked me about KHC the other day, and I refer to Kraft Heinz as the mother of all value trades. But I'll tell you, this thing doesn't look bad on a. And I did take a position. I started a position in this one today, because look at the long-term chart in KHC. Doesn't that actually look appealing? Right? I've talked about how I don't like to name. I don't like to buy names in downtrends, but this name has gone through the value area and has been basing, and it looks like it's. If you take a step back here, it's not in a downtrend anymore. It's above the 200-day moving average. So you talk about a cheap name that, if you want to do something different, look at this base in this name. So again, I don't like names in downtrends, but this name is no longer in a downtrend. It's above the 200-day moving average. So game on for something, again, a little bit different, rather than, having, 10 growth positions all in software. I think it helps to kind of look at some different things. All right, so that's that. Let me go back to a couple of trades. So Caterpillar, Honeywell, Home Depot was another one that I was whining about yesterday, because, and I forgot to show this chart yesterday. So I mentioned I would go over it in the beginning, but Home Depot was a trade that I got into yesterday. Took it off here and then rolled it to another contract, and it did one of these things. Well, I bought the dip today in Home Depot because I do like the name, and I think it has a chance to kind of bounce. But look at this thing. It completely took out. So as ugly as that candle was yesterday, and this is why I was saying in yesterday's video, one day is not a pattern, especially in candlesticks. Is sometimes they can look very ugly, a one-day pattern, but you need 3 days for a pattern in candlestick charting. So even though this failed pretty decently, it didn't lose any of the short-term moving averages, and it's basically back to what I thought it was going to do. So nice, and I got back in that this morning. And then I started to look. So once I kind of established a couple trades, I mean, I traded more than usual today, because I just kind of saw the writing on the wall that some of the growth names really had some good support. And I thought, hey, this is a dip that could get bought. I started to see the VIX go from 33.67 down below 33, then 32. And I said, you know what, this is probably going to be another, buy the dip. And it did take some of these names a good few hours to kind of base a little bit. But this was even before I started to see the call buying in SE. This is always, I don't want to say always, because there's no sure things and there's no 100% of the time type thing. But SE has been one of those names, is my go-to names in a dip. And then once I got into it, we started to see some momentum call buying in it, but to kind of confirm. But if we look at the 1 hour, this did take out a VPOC, so it's going to be hitting some resistance here, but that's why you take some targets. SE, and then if I already mentioned CrowdStrike, which is also one of my names, but you can see this is also rallying into a bit of resistance too. Fastly was another one, right, that we saw some call. This one's got a little bit more, but again, if you look at the daily chart, they're all going to look a bit similar. This one did not get back above value, but once I saw, I think, the second call buyer on the tape, I said, all right, I'll give this thing a shot. SE was the first one that I got into, and then I got into some Fastly, and then I started taking some profits in Caterpillar and Honeywell as well. And then we put on a nice, just taking advantage of some names where I do think buyers will return. We put on a run into earnings trade idea. This was a member's idea. I thought that was pretty good. UNP. So again, I actually started I did quite a bit of trading today. And I got a little bit more aggressive as the day wore on. We saw a lot of Neo calls. Again, something that they were buying calls all the way on the top, up at $16, and now they're buying calls into the dip. Seems to be a little bit smarter to me. So I took a speculative position in this. Half of these names, if you look further down, like I took a shop target. I took Home Depot targets. Home Depot, I took off the ad. I put on a little bit of a team trade. I took that thing fully off. So some of what I was doing today was scalping and day trading. Here's my target in Neo. I did put on a short Tesla trade at the end of the day. Again, no reason to kind of stick in that trade if I wasn't going to get a profit in it. And you know what happens with Tesla too. I don't want to stay short that thing for very long. It's just not worth it. SPWR, I decided to take that. This is funny. People buy calls in this stuff. It's a $9 stock. I never understood that. And same thing. Sometimes it's a $3 stock and somebody buys calls. Just buy the stock. In my opinion, so much better. VRTX was also a name. So again, I did quite a bit. Even though I was advocating having a lot of patience as the morning wore on. I went full on aggressive mode buying the dip today, as I saw just repeat call buying in a few different names today, and the VIX going lower and support to trade off of. So this worked. I had a really, really nice day today. And again, taking profits, as I've said, here's basically as I'm commentating the room during the day. I said this at 9 o'clock, a half an hour before the market opened. I would like to see another washout day before I do any serious buying, but we'll see. I'll let price action be my guide and what they will be buying in options. And this is my thought on getting stopped out on CrowdStrike. Broke through my stop, so kind of what I thought initially. The selling's not done. Be patient. And then around 11 o'clock, I said, I added to a couple dip names, but I'm really playing a lot of value, as that is where the momentum I see in the first couple hours of the day. Then we started to monitor these things, and then I put in here just my opinion. If you've been waiting to buy a dip in one of these growth names, FSLY started to see that. And then my thought here at the end of the day with 1.5, around 2:30 today, I said make sure you lock in some gains versus getting super greedy. My plan is to take a good portion off, some already done, in names like SE, Fastly, Neo, and then leave the runners on. So that's exactly what I did. I left some of those trades on. I got out of. I did get out of the Caterpillar, the Honeywell. I left on KHC. I left a portion on of SE, as well as Fastly, and a couple other ones as well, and started a new trade in SPWR. So I actually did quite a bit of dip buying today. All right, guys. So that's today's video. And again, take things one day at a time. Of course, realize that it's it is now full on earning season. As I thought with the banks, I really didn't think they were going to reveal much. The takeaway that I got from listening to or seeing the comments, look at this JP Morgan flat on the day. Again, the bank earnings are so difficult to play. These banks generally don't move on earnings that much. Maybe one out of the five names actually moves decently. But I think Jamie Dimon and company basically said everything that we thought they were going to say. They had a good trading quarter, but then they came out and said, well, we don't expect that, trading might revert back to the mean in terms of not being as strong next quarter. And they said that there's a lot of uncertainties right now. Not much that revealed that we didn't know. So, I think that's par for the course for the banks. And then the other thing is, again, if you got the main thing too, which I talked about in yesterday's video, is learning a little bit. Make sure you write down some things whenever we have one of these dips. And if you got caught in a few names, there's always lessons to be learned. For example, I always try to tell traders in the room, be careful of the growth names and the software names. Sometimes they do pull back. They just get very overcrowded. And it could be painful if you're caught in a whole bunch of them. So if you had 6 or 7 of these growth names on, it's a reminder for you to, rotate out of these things yourself, right? When everything goes up and it looks a little bit too frothy, take a couple of them off and either move into cash or put on some different types of trades so that if they sell off software, in software, and this only was up 0.5%, by the way, for the day, which was an underperformer. But how much did this go down yesterday? This history repeats with the software group. It rallies, it gets way overcrowded, and then it has a hard sell-off. We've seen that probably about 5 or 6 times in the last 2 years, outside of the whole COVID move. But it just does happen, and you have to protect yourself by not having, over 5 positions on in the same damn group. It's going to be very painful when that does happen. Again, it's not that frequent, but it does happen. Also, I just wanted to go over the S&P chart. Right, the S&P chart, by the way, kind of like back in this range, no big deal. But what's interesting is this diamond chart. So the Dow 30 names closed above value. They failed yesterday, but again, maybe some names within the Dow 30 names, the more industrial names. There's some tech in there too, obviously, but maybe this leads a little bit. Look at the nice volume today in the diamonds. Right, and we did see some call buying in that in the ETF as well. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.